On a white background, one by one, dark blue letters appear, forming the text, "The Collective Impact Project presents." The titles fade. Again, one by one, dark blue lettering appears, forming the text, "Making Room for Change." The word change is in a lighter blue. Titles fade. In between two sets of two horizontal lines, one blue, one yellow, the title appears, "Inclusive Participation." The video opens with a split screen. Elliot is on the left-hand side, Fran on the right.
Hello, my name is Elliot Dewhurst.
And my name is Fran Odette. The term inclusive participation means that every person can take part in all aspects of their communities, organizations, and governments.
It also means that these groups and spaces are fully accessible and welcome the diverse contributions of all persons, ensuring that they are fully included, participate equally, and feel valued. The experience of inclusion and accessibility when attending events and meetings is an important conversation. Fran and I recently spoke with some colleagues about their experiences in this area.
So let's find out what our colleagues had to say about attending meetings or gatherings that had not been inclusive. And what did that look like?
Image changes to head and shoulders shot of Ingrid speaking.
My experience when I have attended meetings that have not been inclusive have included things like speakers not identifying themselves before speaking, so it can help me to keep track of who is speaking. Also, not having accessible material. They're always saying to me how pretty it is, but it's not functional for me. I don't need pretty. I need just plain and big and bold. I'm having a lot of contrast. It allows me as much as possible to independently interact with the material, which is something that I really enjoy.
Video switches to Brianna speaking.
There's been a number of events where they will be scheduled and then at the last minute they'll say, "Sorry, we couldn't find ASL interpretation." And the event goes on. It'll be like, "Oh, the auto captions aren't working, but we're just going to keep going." And that's not seen as a priority. You know, the event can go on without it. And I'm someone who I really rely on like auto captions, especially for events like that. And it can be really, really hard to engage with what I'm doing when they're not on. Sometimes dietary restrictions or different kinds of food aren't even a part of it. And often when they are, there's a very limited quantity. Instead of actually reaching out and asking people individually like what they need and making sure it's prepared beforehand, there's usually like 5 dairy-free, 5 gluten-free, and whoever comes first gets it. Not to mention other allergy restrictions as well.
Video changes to Michael speaking.
It's very difficult when I'm going into a meeting and there's either presenters who are not speaking in plain language or accessible language. And that is a big thing for me. I need to understand it. We need presenters who can speak that language. And if we don't have a supporter there who can describe it afterwards, it makes it very difficult. I've been in meetings where presenters are speaking and nothing is understandable. It just gets to the point where it's like frustrating.
Video shifts to Dulin speaking.
So when I was in a meeting, I was excluded. I felt uncomfortable, not valued, not respected.
Return to Elliot speaking.
It's important that we think about how we work together and how we meet with each other. So, what is lost when people with disabilities are not meaningfully included in meetings and gatherings?
Ingrid.
When people are not meaningfully included in meetings or gathering, you're really losing a wealth of diversity of perspective and expertise.
Brianna.
I think we lose valuable voices, especially in a situation where it is like a disability justice focused event. I think going into the event, you're inherently undermining the values of disability justice if you're not honoring as many access needs as you possibly can.
Dulin.
I'm just on a chair sitting and not being heard.
Fran.
The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities states that people with disabilities have the right to meaningful participation. So who benefits from an inclusive event?
Ingrid.
Absolutely everyone benefits. Our world is incredibly diverse, and it's so important that as much as possible, with our meetings and with our events, that we are reflecting the world outside and that we are bringing in that diversity, and so that everyone feels represented and that their experiences and knowledge are also represented in whatever it is that's being created.
Brianna.
The more people that can authentically and safely and comfortably engage with events, the better, and the more your message is going to be spread and heard.
Michael.
If the meeting is inclusive, the benefit is for everybody.
Video switches back to split screen, Elliot on the left, Fran on the right.
From what our colleagues have to say, we can see why it's important to begin with inclusive design when we plan meetings and events. Inclusion is not something to tack on at the end. Inclusive design means the experience and ideas of persons with disabilities help build accessibility and inclusion into every part of the plan.
I absolutely agree with you, Elliot. I think how we work together as a disability inclusion movement is as important as what we do. No one left behind also means that in our meetings and events. Now let's find out what some suggestions have been given that we can use when planning a meeting or an event to improve inclusion for all participants.
Video switches to single shot of Ingrid.
It's really important that they try to include attendees in that organization. And by that, I mean with their invitations, asking that question, what would you need to be able to fully and meaningfully participate in this meeting or in this event? When it comes to online meetings, that it's really important to make sure that that invitation is inclusive, something or accessible. What I need is to have the Zoom link actually embedded into an email so that I can just easily click on it. So that's another component of really just not assuming that because people have the same disability that they actually require the same accommodation. It could be very different.
Brianna.
I think that's something I find really meaningful is when whoever is planning the event reaches out to the audience and asks them what would be inclusive.
Michael.
Making sure that, and I'm talking about considering the people that are presenting and making sure that they're able to talk to the best of their ability in an accessible language. Also, sometimes last minute changes are harder. You can't get what you're hoping for. Hopefully, the support is there to help with.
Dulin.
Make sure we get a support person or a advisor to help the member.
Elliot.
Planning is definitely important, but it's also necessary to consider what happens during the event. What are some things organizers can do while an event or meeting is going on to make sure everyone has the opportunity to participate meaningfully?
Ingrid.
I think really thinking about the layout of in-person events could be really great. A lot of times I've found that when putting like the tables and things together, there's not really like a good path for people who are using mobility devices to be able to navigate. And even for myself as a visually impaired person, and even having a sighted guide with me, it can be really difficult to navigate rooms that are really tightly packed. I would say having a lot of vocal description going on during the event is incredibly helpful and is an aspect that sometimes a lot of people tend to forget about. With online meetings, not having enough patience for me to unmute when asked a question or being invited to contribute to a conversation. So I'll tell people, I'll give them a number like count to 30 and give people a really good time to find that unmute button.
Brianna.
That's some of the big ones that I'm seeing a lot more often lately is having ASL interpreters as well as auto captions.
Michael.
You're doing conversations. Well, from the perspective of somebody with a developmental disability, make sure they're involved in the conversations. Make sure you're hearing from them as just as much as you're hearing from everybody else. That makes it feel inclusive.
Fran.
Both inclusion and accessibility are critical considerations, but they're not the same thing. What are your thoughts about the difference between accessibility and inclusion?
Ingrid.
People think access means only one thing, and so they might have like one accessible door for everyone to get through, and they think that that will just accommodate everyone's needs, and it doesn't always. We want the ability to actually get into and access events with the least amount of barriers. It's really important to keep in mind not only a person's ability to get into your event, but how they're going to interact with every component of that event once they're there.
Elliot.
Now we've heard about planning and we've heard about what happens during the meeting, but tell us, what helps you after the meeting or event is over?
Brianna.
Some places send out materials from the event, links to whoever was speaking, little worksheets about what was talked about. I think the follow-up and the engagement is really important, especially for people who maybe they had a headache when the event was going and didn't get as much from it as they wanted, and they have the ability to go back and engage with it again.
Return to the split screen. Elliot on the left, Fran on the right.
Elliot, I think that when we have meetings that are accessible and inclusive for folks with disabilities, we're actually making them more inclusive and accessible for everyone.
That's right, Fran. And let's remember that some things benefit everyone, like scent-free spaces and diverse catering options. However, specific individual accessibility supports should be expected and will look different for each person.
Together, I think we need to shift the responsibility for inclusion and accessibility from the person with the disability to the event or meeting organizer. So the question then is not what accommodations do you need, but rather what supports can we provide so that you can fully participate?
Because in the end, when we have the participation, knowledge, and experience of all people, our conversations are deeper, our considerations broader, and our results much improved. After all, we can't create a national disability movement without being fully inclusive ourselves.
Dissolve to a white background. Credits appear in dark blue lettering. Collective Impact Project. Making room for change. The word change is in a lighter blue. Inclusive participation. Content producers, hosts, and editors. Elliot Dewhurst. Dorami Elling. April Dobbin. Fran Odette. Ingrid Palmer. Tara Lavendier. John Guido. Shelley Fletcher. Christopher Sutton. Lori Van Holt. Heather Walkus. Video interviews. Ingrid Palmer. Brianna Manley. Michael. And Dulin Lobo. English audio description, Corey Stuvey. ASL, LSQ, captioning and French audio description by Wavefront Center for Communication Accessibility. The Wavefront logo appears. the Collective Impact Project Steering Committee, Autism Alliance of Canada, CCRW, Council of Canadians with Disabilities, Inclusion Canada, L'Arch, People First of Canada, Realize, Rick Hansen Foundation, Spinal Cord Injury Canada, and Wavefront Centre for Communication Accessibility. Resources: Listen, Include, Respect. Website: https://www.listenincluderespect.com. Video production by Eric Nettle with Nettle Media Incorporated. The Government of Canada logo appears, the word Canada with a small Canadian flag over the last A. Funded in part by the Government of Canada's Social Development Partnerships Program, Disability. Copyright 2023 Autism Alliance of Canada, Canadian Council of Rehabilitation and Work, Council of Canadians with Disabilities, Inclusion Canada, L'Arch, People First of Canada, Realize, Rick Hansen Foundation, Spinal Cord Injury Canada, Wavefront Centre for Communication Accessibility. All rights reserved. End of video. Fade to black.